welcome back to TSC Talks, the podcast where we talk about tuberous sclerosis complex and other related issues. My name is Jill Woodworth, and I am your host. Thanks again for tuning in. I'm sitting here, and in about 20 minutes, I have a call with Dan Klein from the TS Alliance, who is starting the TSC Now podcast on May 15th, which is Global TSC Awareness Day. And he kindly asked me to be a guest. So he sent me some questions, and I've been a little bit nervous and, wrapped up and in a ball of worry about getting the right message out about the podcast. And I hope that it comes out all right when you hear it. So this is my little nervous rant before the podcast. But I also, when I was thinking about talking about my next guest, I wanted to make sure that I mentioned how important she was in the start of the podcast or the evolution of the podcast. Everybody that has been involved is equally as important, but she's the next guest, so I'm going to give her a shout. Julie, met you in the summer, last summer at the World Conference. I kind of was breaking through that fourth wall where I knew a lot of people from Facebook, had put a lot of, really intense information out there, personal information about, for the cause, and really feeling vulnerable. And, I've gone on about that. But anyways, Julie was there, and she was a good friend to me, and we talked a lot. She shared a lot about her life with TSC and her son and her other, how the impact with her other children and stuff that had happened. And it was just a great way to step outside of my comfort zone and connect with someone else and hear about their TSC life, because I think sometimes we get stuck in the idea that we have it really hard and the worst, gloom and doom. And there's other people out there that have it equally as hard or worse. And, there's really no levels here, but we got to just try to come together where we can. And Julie really met me where I was, and we had some good discussions. So I invited her on the podcast a few months back, and she was at a period of change and moving to better her son's opportunities for advancement and getting past some transition issues, which she's going to go into detail about. I'm going to break this episode down into 3 episodes, so I will share more on Julie's background in my next intro, because this is getting a little wordy. She's a volunteer with the TS Alliance. She is a education parent mentor, a dependent adult transition resource coordinator, and much more. She is a phenom. She knows SPED law. She has attended lots of trainings on IEP, 504. So there's just some solid information out there for you, whatever your experience thus far is with TSC. So I'm going to stop talking. I think I've covered everything. Thanks again for tuning in. I hope you follow Dan's podcast, TSC Now, and continue to listen to this one. Give me your feedback. Love you all. Thanks so much. Take it away, Julie. Julie, thanks so much for being on TSC Talks. I've known you for a little while, met you at the World Conference, and been trying to get this scheduled. So thanks for making it happen.
Yeah, I'm happy we could finally connect.
I know. It was great. When I met you there, I felt like I just felt really like I was one of the people that had more, my kids were a little older. It was hard to really make that connection with some of the younger people. And I'm not saying you're old, because you're not, but, someone that had some more experience, I guess. So, yeah, I was like, oh, thank God. I know somebody that, yeah. So why don't you just tell me a little bit about how your life intersected with TSC? I do want to touch on behaviors in particular, and also the transition stuff, and that you've gotten in place here now. So.
Okay. Our second son, Matthew, was developmentally delayed as an infant, and he was 4 weeks premature, but 2 to 3 months delayed. And so we finally were able to get a physician to do a CAT scan at 1 year old, because they were convinced he was just going to catch up, but he didn't. Uh-huh. And so they found the lesions in his brain on the CAT scan, and initially had told us that he had toxoplasmosis. And
that's a new one.
Based on my history of working with veterinarians. So, but my doctor, of course, was never worried about it. He was sure I had been exposed to it, so it would have not affected the baby. They would have gotten the antibodies. So I tested positive for toxoplasmosis, which my doctor always said I would, and he tested negative. So they were retesting him when we were in the neurologist's office, and she got the results. And she says, "Oh, it's not toxoplasmosis."
It rhymes though.
Yeah. And so, she started asking about the other lesions and stuff on his skin, which he was born with the hypopigmented patches. And that's when she said, "Oh, well, he's got tuberous sclerosis then." But then she didn't say another word. And so I went home, and back then the internet in 2001, the internet.
2001. Yep, he's Jack's. He's my son's age. Yeah.
Dial-up internet, and barely what little information we could find was downright scary. So he had not been diagnosed with seizures, even though I suspected them on a couple of occasions.
Really?
My concerns were dismissed. That's not what a seizure looks like, and that's not typical
Really?
Seizure. And yes.
Well, it was early 2000s, and that's not even that long ago.
Yeah. So,
still.
yeah. But after we had the diagnosis of tuberous sclerosis, or potential diagnosis of tuberous sclerosis, if I went to the doctor and said, "I think I saw a seizure," they were like, "Let's put him on medicine."
Oh boy.
They didn't second guess me after that.
Yeah.
So that's our
how you got
entry
started. Yep.
into TS. And of course I went right into the letter writing campaigns that we used to do back then, the Stamp Out Tuberous Sclerosis. So I've just been involved in advocacy ever since. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And you have other children.
I do have Matthew has an older sibling, Aaron. Aaron's 21, Matthew's 19, and he has two younger siblings. Jessie is 13 and Hannah is the youngest, only girl, and she is 12.
So you're pretty big.
Yes, and we homeschool now. We've been homeschooling for 3 years, so.
Yeah, I want to hear a little more about that. I guess just back to the story. So he was diagnosed, and what kinds of, has he had a lot of complications? I mean, you don't have to go into detail, but what has been the most challenging parts of getting through, childhood and up to where you are now?
Well, I feel like early childhood came pretty easy, thankfully. Early intervention services had already been implemented before he was diagnosed. He was getting physical therapy and occupational therapy as an infant. And then after the TS diagnosis, they added speech therapy. And then we had as he went into school, we had an IEP right from the start. So as he went from the early intervention into IEP. So everything seemed to come pretty easy, and I had a lot of faith that they knew what they were doing. So I just kind of went with the flow. And we had the benefit of great teachers early on in elementary. He did do self-contained kindergarten class his first year in kindergarten with 4 other students. And that teacher, and many people had told me as well that he's not autistic. He doesn't act autistic. She said, "I've been teaching for 30 years and the first time I've told a joke in a classroom and somebody laughed." So he's always had a sense of humor. So they took him out of the autistic classroom from that point on. The next year, he'd been mainstreamed ever since.
Okay.
So he did very well. We were fortunate. We had great teachers and great people to guide us through that process. So when we got to upper elementary school and the new principal and everything, things started to change. And behaviors started to evolve.
I was searching for a word there too. I'm like, how do you describe that? Because I know what you're talking about.
I can't say they just showed up out the blue. They did evolve, and we had done.
Yeah, but you didn't know probably what they were. They're boys, and
that's a good point.
Seriously, my son was a wild man and I thought, he's just really an energetic kid for a long time,
Yeah, but we did do neurofeedback.
Oh, really?
And that worked out very well for him to help him with transition. It just, for whatever reason, helped his brain process the transitions from classwork to outside back to inside.
Tell me just a little bit about neurofeedback.
Bioneurofeedback, they put electrodes on the brain and they kind of pick their spots on what they want to target. And for him, it was the ADD type of behaviors. and the anxiety type of behaviors. And so he would watch. We had started out with a program. She had a specific program where he would watch. And as long as he's focused on that program, the screen stays on and the music plays. And it looked like a video game. It's like a little spaceship flying through a corridor. And if he ever lost concentration, it would fade away or the sound fade away and so he would have to refocus to make it come back on. And if you think about it, it's food for the brain wants it. So the brain's going to make you do what it wants you to do so it can have that food. And so it was very beneficial for him. It proved to be very effective. We did it for almost a year. It was not covered by insurance.
I was going to say, how did you find that?
This technician who did the therapy, she was an RN, she came and did a presentation at one of our Autism Society meetings. And she described it as being able to rebuild damaged neurons.
Like kind of neuroplasticity and...
Yeah. So I was like, well, that sounds like something I might want to try. So we did it, and he did great with it. We did it almost a year. The teachers noticed a huge difference in him as well, and we promoted it like mad.
Oh, I bet. How pricey was it?
I'm trying to remember.
If you can't, doesn't matter. I'm just curious.
It was... I felt like we were getting a bargain. I think she was helping us out quite a bit. But
that's good.
I want to say, we probably went 2 or 3 times a week, and it was $35 to $50 a visit.
Okay, so that's less than a lot of stuff that's out there.
Yeah, and it was better. I wasn't ready to do medication.
That was my next question.
Yeah,
he hadn't been on meds.
No, we had not been on behavior modifying meds. The only thing he ever took was epilepsy medications.
So he did develop seizures.
Oh yeah, they put him on seizures about 2 weeks after he got the TS probable diagnosis at 1 year old. When I said I thought he was having a seizure, they did. They first put him on phenobarbital.
Yep. And that seems to be the starter med for a lot.
Yeah. And it was his pediatrician that was prescribing it. So
makes sense.
He went to what he knew. Oh no, actually the neurologist recommended it. That's right. Because the pediatrician wanted to give him Tegretol.
Okay. Yeah, Dr. Teal prescribed that for my son too, phenobarb first med.
Yeah, we didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. I didn't feel like it was doing anything, and I didn't feel like it was certainly not helping his ability to progress. So the pediatrician switched him to Tegretol, but he had allergic reaction to Tegretol. He developed the rash, the little tiny dots.
My daughter had it too. Yep.
Really?
Yes, she did. She was allergic to a bunch of them. Went from one to another. Yeah. But
Tegretol. But then,
Tegretol.
From there we went to Dallas, the Texas Scottish Rite Hospital in Dallas, and they put him on Topamax.
Okay.
And that proved to be very effective. We were very happy with Topamax for years. And his neurologist here maintained that. But of course, I wanted better seizure control, and
he was still having
Yeah, his seizures were very short-lived, 30 to 40 seconds long, but they were frequent. He would have them a couple of times a day. And they seemed to come in spurts, and then they would go away. So I, of course, began to question, well, maybe medication is not the route for him, because if it's going away without us suggesting medication, what if medication is not working anyway?
Right.
So we went to Alabama because they opened the TS clinic in Alabama, and they were, everyone's like, well, yeah, he's having seizures and we should do this. They wanted to do the mapping and everything for surgery. And I was like, well, I know there is surgery though, and I'm not willing to take that risk because he's making progress.
Right. They're not life-threatening that, and they're not affecting his development.
And this was all before school age, I'm sure. This was all, it's all a blur.
Oh, I know. And so.
But eventually we made our way to Cincinnati when he was 11.
Okay.
And they put him on Sabril. And he didn't have the seizures at all while he was on Sabril.
Really?
2 years he went without seizures, and